of age, that kind of
even probably
bracket.
possibly slightly before it, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How have they managed? How have they done since then?
Well, so when they went out, we brought them. They have a place where they can go. It's near the yard at home where they can run in and out. They have shelter, so it is allowing us to get them out a little bit earlier. They're still fed milk outside.
Yeah.
Weighing them off outside. So they did well all along. And we had to, usually we cover them for coccidiosis, so we give them a dose for that, and they were covered. We felt after kind of the protection period we've gone out of that they needed another dose again, but in hindsight I think it was more the grass scour issue probably came into play a little bit. So yeah, we had to touch of that other years along the way. We had more of it. We hadn't as much of it this year, but I think that's down to us experience on it and recognising the calves not being 100%. Now there's 28 calves. There's 24 in this bunch. There was 28. So there was 4 of the calves. Just all of a sudden started to lose a bit of condition, not thriving. So we took them out, took them home. They were a bit loose, and we put them into the shed on hay 2.5 weeks ago, and they literally turned inside. It took about 2 weeks, but then literally they turned inside out, which it has to be down to what's going into them.
Sure.
Yeah. Now we brought them. You might see here that the grass. It's fair. It was part of first cut silage, but there was a section that we held off. It was quite fibrous, a little bit overgrown, but we're trying to get the fibre into the calf to help their stomach as much as possible, and that's why they're on this. We slightly restricted what grass they were eating to a certain extent, and strip grazed it in a couple of sections across. Again, it doesn't look a pretty sight, but when we're not in the aesthetic business, we're trying to get the right thing into the calf. And the bunch here, the 24 that have stayed here, have powered on. All along, by the way, they've been getting 2 kilos of nuts. So they've powered along. We're very happy with them. They have been dosed already for worms, a general dose. So we're happy enough with how they're progressing, this bunch are. The 4 that we took out, as I say, they're nearly ready to come back and join them now. So we just monitor them closely. They'll be that bit older, getting onto the grass.
Okay. So we lots and lots of different theories about grass scour, lots of different opinions, different views, how to solve it, how not. In general, the common thread is calves are suffering from the syndrome. If they do go back inside, they recover. I think it's reasonable what Paul has said. It's related to intake, what's going on inside the room. And we've got a lot of cows now eating perennial ryegrass very, very young, getting out of that 8 to 10 week point, and some of those cows may not be adapting as well. We probably have to look at our dosing patterns for coccidiosis. There's a lot of, again, different theories about this, that it lasts for a period of time, which is not necessarily true. And I think coccidiosis doses have to be used quite wisely in the face of an anticipated challenge, maybe a week to 10 days before you expect a challenge, 3 week point when you're inside, and possibly a week to 10 days after hitting grass. On a good few farms this year, we've restricted grass and strip grazed, which has worked quite successfully, where we've limited the intake of grass and maintained the intake of concentrate and possibly a dry silage or something with it, and that seems to have benefited some people. So I think people are finding the signs more quickly, which is great, and those calves can come back in. I'm careful about all this. There's lots of spurious theories, there's lots of things being dosed and so on, and we're not sure whether any of that stuff actually genuinely works or not. It's very hard to research it. Talking to UCD researchers, to get a license to do research on looking at what's inside in the calf stomach is a bit of a challenge. So we're going to have to learn this really by experience, and I think farmers' stories, what they find out, what they try, is going to be very, very useful to us. So it's definitely a common experience and something that we have to keep an eye on. Dosing calves, Paul, you mentioned you dose them roughly. When did you start? What sort of products are you using or thinking of using?
Just usually use a basic ivermectin product, be it pour-on or injection, and that depends on the weather really. If we've decided we're going doing them Friday, they'll get whatever. Ideally, the pour-on is easy. I suppose we'd be just a little bit concerned, make sure you're getting the right amount on them and all the rest. The injection, it's definitely gone into them. So I'd alternate it a bit. As the year progresses, I may change the dose to a drench. We'll see how things are going. Again, it's time and labour and all the rest of it, and what happens, you know.
Okay, so we're really looking at the future of worm dosing, and we are really concerned about resistance in the worms that we have. So the worm becoming resistant to the types of doses we're using. We have a couple of different classes, but ivermectins are used very, very commonly. And the issue is if we keep using them repeatedly and we don't allow the worms as such to natural populations or normal populations of worms to exist, we keep building up populations of resistant worms. So we end up in a situation where you get to the point that your treatment will not do anything for you at all. So to combat that, as we look into the future, more dung samples, so we'd worm on the basis of the presence of worm eggs, okay? Your vet can help you out with that. We'd also worm on the basis of lack of thrive, or we'd also worm on the basis of presence of a cough. So our lungworm is different from our stomach worm, and we got to approach those things in two slightly different ways, even though the same wormer is used. So we're going to think about in the future, I think everybody needs to think about, have we a facility to weigh calves? That may become very important to us in the future to determine whether we use a wormer on the weaker calves only. So you may only be using a wormer on calves that are not growing as well, calves that are showing scar or showing a higher degree of worm eggs. It's all got to be looked at, and I think this is something that's coming down the tracks of us pretty hard. Paul, you have a good cell count history here. How are you going this year? What's happened?
So currently running at 81. We were a little bit high in the spring. Well, when I say high, it was up over 150 or 60 for a while. So, but came back down again. Then last year we did average for the whole year something around 100,000 on the cell count, and we did selective dry cow therapy then. So about 40% of the cows actually got an antibiotic, and 60% didn't, got teeth sealed over.
Very good. Okay. So, and often what we see is that people who have gone down the route of selective, we get this bump at the start of the year, and we get that slightly raised cell count, and often people get very anxious about it and they're worried that it hasn't worked properly. But really, when we start looking at analysing that early recording, we often find that the proportion of high cell count is equivalent across whether tubed or not tubed. So be careful before you panic and weather it out a little bit. Have you found then, have they come down, or are you okay?
Yeah, so just the report came in the other day from the last milk recording and that, and looking at it, and you can see on the graph that increase is there in the spring a little bit, but I mean it's not an alarming increase. You know, your average cell count might go up close to 200 for a collection or whatever, and then it comes back down. So it's obviously the cow just dealing with it herself as opposed to us intervening.
And you've built a new shed for your dry cuts here. This is the shed we're standing in at the moment.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
You used to have a little bit of trouble with the heifers coming in. These come in with high cell count. How's that resolved, or what have you done?
So yeah, we were getting an odd one. Initially, we had some that were coming in. You'd actually see clinical signs of mastitis in them, and then we had an odd one subclinically. You wouldn't see anything. So we added on to the shed where we normally put the heifers in. We gave ourselves extra cubicles. So now we've about 20-25 heifers in 30 cubicles or thereabouts. That was the first thing. So that they'd have enough space and all that to lie down. What we also then did was started using a disinfectant on the cubicles once a week, and we found that to be very good.
That's a powdered disinfectant.
A powdered disinfectant, yeah. Okay. So we use, we line the cubicles, it's lime and sawdust mixed, right? That's used every day, cleaned and lined every day, and the second clean, and in the evening just a quick rub to rub off anything heavy. But they're limed that, and then once a week, maybe every 10 days, we go in with the powdered disinfectant.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Did you seal heifers, anything like that? Did you
no, we avoided that. We said we tried this before we went down the road to sealing heifers.
Okay.
So obviously we've 2 milk recordings done now, and we haven't had a trouble. I had two heifers. One heifer got mastitis, and that heifer is a heifer that doesn't lie up in the cubicles. Okay. That's fine. And one other heifer had a slightly raised cell count, and she must have got some bit at some stage along the way. But in comparison to what we had, if I rule out that cow that lies and it doesn't lie up, and just we've only 1 out of the lot then. Whereas before we'd have 4, 5 maybe out of 25. Okay. So it was a bit concerning for a while. So we tried that, and that has made a big difference. So between the extra room and the powder disinfectant, we're happy to do that for now and see how things go without going down.
Many cases of mastitis spring, were you happy enough for
no, not that many really. I mean, you know, your usual, probably 5 or 6 cases in total, with 2 of those cases were cows that got milk fever.
Okay, so if we're really looking at clinical mastitis in springtime, our expectation is probably about 4 per 100 cows. So if we have 70 cow herd, maybe 3 per 70 cows per month in that early period. Okay, once we're over that, we're starting to think about it a little bit. So what really encourages, really helpful for vets, and certainly from the work that Andrew and I are doing with the cell count. If we have a good recording of the mastitis cases, we can predict whether it is coming from the dry cow or whether it's lactational mastitis. And there's 2 different ways of approaching that. And certainly we find we're probably over-treating some cows in terms of antibiotics that will not respond because of dry cow issues. And also we get cows during the lactation period, which we probably might have to treat if we actually handle it correctly. What's really good what Paul has done with the shed, big wide feed passage here, it's over 5 metres. People say, look, it's too wide. If you can give the cows space, spread that manure, let it dry out, we're going to have a lot cleaner cows getting up in the cubicles. So everywhere we can create space, we'll try and create space. And I think a key thing that Paul has done with the heifers and with the cows is spread them out on the surface area. Yeah, would that be fair to say?
Yeah, when this shed came into play in the springtime, the original system had the capacity cow per cubicle, heifer per cubicle, right? But the place was full. If there was any event then that you had a few more, or you need to separate cows or dividing ones that were near calving and further away and all the rest, it just meant with the divides up, sometimes some of the sheds were a little bit more crowded than they were. Once this came into play here, while it's a lot more cubicles than we actually need, I would say now that no, we need them, because it has just given so much more flexibility in terms of putting the animals over in this shed that are far away from calving or whatever the case may be. More room inside, it's actually easier. There's more cubicles to be cleaned, but it's an awful lot easier to clean those cubicles.
Because you have the space, yeah.
The space, there's not the same bullying going on. There's none of that happening. There's loads of feed space as well. You know,
so we have a lot of feed space, and one thing I'll always say, an extra unused cubicle is not useless. I think that's very important that people realise it. And I know we've only got a relatively short housing period, but a lot happens in that short housing period. We've got our dry cow stage, we've got our transition cows and our fresh cows. So feed space, what we invest in that will repay us back even in a relatively short housing period. So I think the lesson, Paul, is fair to say, don't be afraid of selective dry cow therapy if you line things up well.
Oh yeah, okay? On the selective dry cow therapy, there's one thing I will say about it. You can't do it 90%. You have to do it 100%. You have to follow it to the letter in terms of from your dry cow stage, where the cows are going to be, and all of that. All that is right. That you have the space for them. That you are cleaning cubicles and liming them is essential. But also on the selective inside the parlour when you're drying them off, there's no room for error. So you need to take your time at it and go about it the right way and plan to do it. And don't go planning to do 50 cows on Saturday morning or Friday morning or whatever. We did it now. Whenever we do it, we try and do it in 10s or 40s. There's 14 units in the parlour, so maybe or it's 3 5s or something like that. Because you just get fed up of it after a while. To be honest about it, it's one job everyone. I don't know anyone that likes it. So you just need to be very careful and methodical about it. And if you get each step 100% right, then you get everything 100% right. But if you leave any step along the process down, the whole thing is useless at that point. So that's one thing you do need to watch for. And we have been nervous about it at the start. But look, see what you need to do to get the thing right. If everything is right along the way, we haven't had a problem with it, and we're quite happy to do it and continue. We started off with just doing maybe 20-30% selective, or teat seal only, should I say, and then now we're up at 60-65%, and I'm basing it on the results from milk recording, and again knowing the cows yourself as well, and if you know there's any issues, marking down any issues they may have had along the way, because sometimes a cow may cure between 2 milk recordings, and she may not come up as a high one, so just have a record of those cows as well, because if there's anything to do, you just walk the sheep. in how many in the cows were not antibiotic treated, and it's not causing a problem for the rest of the year. You know, start off a little bit high, yeah, there is that period where you're maybe
it's a little glitch,
yeah, but it levels out. As long as the cow is looked after along the way and she's fed right. And I think a big thing is the lack of stress. When I had a problem with the heifers before, with too many heifers in the shed, it was probably a combination of stress and the environment. Even because we were like meticulous, Peter, we were meticulous about cleaning and lining the cubicles, and they were that we couldn't figure that was not the problem. So in spite of best efforts in keeping everything as clean as possible, I think you do need to remove the stress aspect of it and have the extra bit of room, because you can have them lying down on spotless beds, but stress and bullying and things like that is going to come into play.
Okay, so good advice: space, reduce the stress, be methodical, do it 100%, follow the rules, record.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's key things, and you get the benefit out of investing in the shed. Good stuff.
Right, we're here today on a reseed that Paul and Peter carried out. So, Paul, when did you carry out the
We reseeded on the 17th of April. Prior to that, we took in grass off it as for zero grazing, and once it freshened, we sprayed it off. Left it for 3 weeks. We disked it first. It was our first time disking, actually. We were very happy with it. Brought up a brilliant side on it. It got the line before it was disked, and the 20 on it as well. So yeah, put in then with the power harrow one pass on the 17th of April. We left it then until just last week, and 2 weeks ago we gave it a half bag of nitrogen again, just to boost it on, and sprayed it now 5 days, and yeah, we're just waiting for the weeds to go a bit further, maybe in 10 days or 10 or 12 days from the day to spray, and then we'll try and graze it.
I thought you considered zero grazing.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, when I say graze it, getting it off it, we're going to probably end up zero grazing it, just in terms of stock numbers to get around all this. We don't have it, so.
And the weather situation at the moment?
Yeah, the weather situation at the minute is looking like we're going to need that anyway. This would have been kind of easier marked for zero grazing probably down the line, as we need it. It's a field that's kind of suitable for it. It's away from the milking platform, so yeah, it'll be as good a thing to do as any. Just get it off, get the tiller and going. Hopefully, we need to get some rain, obviously, but yeah, that's the plan with it in a few days' time. Based on what grass I have at home and that, we probably will need to zero graze. So yeah, we'll do that way. If not, if we didn't need the grass, we'd take a young coat of silage off it, and yeah, we'd still aim to take it out fairly young, just to get the tillering in and get the root development in as soon as possible, as opposed to letting it grow into a stronger sort of a meadow.
What was the grass seed mix used?
We went with a 50-50 Abergain Aber-Choice mixture, and the 1 kilo per hectare or per acre of clover then as well. Yeah, that was it. We didn't go with too many different mixes, because the field is going to be used for probably, like as I said, zero grazing in the springtime. We'll take a coat of silage off it, depending then either a second coat or zero grazing, depending on growth and all that, you know, how things are going, how it fits into the system.
Okay, very good. Yeah.
So when picking grass varieties, we look at the Teagasc Pasture Profit Index, which basically rates varieties and profitability. So the main characteristics we would look at for grass varieties on the milking platform would be spring growth, quality, and there's a new trait, grazing utilisation, which has a star rating, where 5 stars indicates grazing utilisation is very good, so they're well grazed out, and 1 star would imply that they're not well grazed out, so cows don't particularly like them. Overall, tetraplides appear to give better graze out, as easier for the cow to graze, as more open sward and more upright. A variety with poor utilisation means cows will potentially get dissatisfied quicker, and in difficult weather may start walking around and poach the paddock. Whereas with a tetraplide, because they like them, they will graze and maybe do less walking and potentially less damage. Clover is something we obviously need to look at, and irrigation farmers, as it's a mandatory requirement. Moor Park and Clonakilty have 8 years trial data done, so an increased milk production of 35 kilos of milk solids per cow per year on average. Same overall dry matter production per year, with 100 kilos of nitrogen per hectare less chemical nitrogen used. There's increased voluntary intake of the grass clover sward, and the quality of the sward gives the increased performance. The increased performance is mainly due to the fact that the fibre in clover is more palatable and there's less fibre in clover also versus grass. 1 kilo per acre of clover recommended by Moore Park. Medium leaf varieties, small leaf varieties, the cows can't really eat them, so they don't get the nutritional benefit that is there with clover. And large leaf, they tend to shade out the grass too much. The post-emergence spray should be put out sooner rather than later. Farmers have a habit of maybe leaving it too long, where the grass is nearly shading out the weed, and the weed is very strong then for the spray to work effectively. So when the weeds leaves are the size roughly of a euro coin, that's time to move in and spray off and get a good kill.